What you think?
Good morning.
Good evening, Richard.
Good evening. How are you both?
I'm good, thanks, mate. How about yourself?
Legendary.
Yeah, not bad. Not
Any-
bad.
Now, while we just wait for a few people to filter in before Rich gets on his epic rant, Ozzy's got some news.
Gotta do better than that, I know. So, latest transfer news is that Jovic, whatever, he's on his way to Juventus.
Do you mean Dusan Vlahovic?
Dusan Vlahovic, yeah, that's the one. Yeah, apparently they're just negotiating the final pieces, and he will be on his way shortly. I can only imagine the Florentine fans are absolutely loving that because they absolutely hate Juventus. So,
Their
massive
owners love
rivalry.
money.
Yeah, they must be a bit disappointed. No one else has come in with more money.
Yeah, well, it's a bit surprising though, isn't it, that he's going there? I mean,
It's
they're
not
what,
very
in seventh
ambitious.
right now?
Yeah, not very ambitious, but it's a very, very safe move for him to keep improving and not risk losing momentum. But it's I'd say it's a bit disappointing.
Yeah, but Rich, I mean, you've got to think about it though. I mean, this summer there's going to be so many clubs after a striker. You could have PSG, you're going to have Real Madrid, you're going to have us, you're going to have potentially United. So many clubs are going to be after a striker, and he goes to Juventus, who have already got a number of strikers.
Yeah,
Doesn't make any sense to me.
No, just it's safe. It's safe, secure, not risky. What can you say? I mean, they're a big name still. I'm not sure whether they're really a big club at the moment, given the state of the team and the league they're in. But I think it's a pity. I'd have thought trying his hand in the Premier League or something would have been, a lot better for him and a lot riskier.
Yeah, well, that's what I'd have put money on him coming to the Premier League, But hey, that's his choice, and that's where he's going.
Yeah. Oh well. I really thought that someone like Arsenal might snap him up, or maybe Spurs, but there we go.
Well, the thing is, though, Rich, I mean, those two clubs at the moment aren't even in the top four. They may not finish in the top four.
Yeah.
And he's going to want to be playing Champions League. I mean, I know Juventus aren't currently in the Champions League spots, but, it doesn't make any sense to me. But like I said, it's his decision. That's where he's going. Like you said, it's a safe kind of move.
And it's one conversation that, I'm always surprised doesn't happen a bit more, but it is almost how much Ronaldo ruined Juventus. The whole club, basically built itself around him, and they lost everything that had actually made them, the top team in Italy for a very long time. So, maybe this is a sign that they're trying to get back to where they were, get away from the older stellar world stars to get some, more muscular, young, hungry strikers. So maybe it is Juventus getting back onto the right path.
Yeah, possibly. I don't know if anybody saw the Haaland interview that was exclusive to Sky Sports. Did you see it, Rich?
No, I haven't actually.
He wants doner kebabs and pina coladas. I'm sure he can get plenty of them in Spain. Fuck off.
Oh dear, Rob, you have really fallen out of love with Haaland, haven't you, in the last few days?
What did he say?
Well, it's just straight facts. I mean, look at the situation. Best striker in the world can come and play in the best team in the world, in the best league in the world, and win every single trophy. But he'd rather go to a museum. They're going to find Haaland in about 20 years' time. There's going to be some guy in a desert with a little brush just uncovering his bones, and here we see that the potent striker Haaland, former glories, never actually achieved what he could have achieved in world football because he went and played mediocrity in Spain.
What made me laugh is that when they were kind of going through the interview on Sky Sports, I think it was on the transfer show at 5 o'clock yesterday. They were talking about this, going, well, it makes sense for him to go to Real Madrid, and then they can put his agent can put a buyout clause of I think they were saying like about 100 million or something like that, 150 million, and then he can come to the Premier League in a few years' time. And I was thinking, that's not what's going to happen at Real Madrid or Barcelona, wherever he does end up. They're going to stick him on a billion, buyout clause, like all of the latest Barcelona players that are currently signing new contracts.
Well, that's the thing, innit? That's the thing, Ozzy. He's edging his bets. By going to Spain before he goes to the Premier League, he's edging his bets because that way he knows that eventually a Premier League club is going to be desperate to sign him. This is the thing. He's playing the game. And it's very inappropriate. He's playing the game. He's going to Real Madrid. He's going to win a Champions League with them or the Spanish League or whatever the hell he wants to win with them for 2 or 3 seasons. And then he's go, look at me, I'm 25, I'm the best goal scorer in Europe. Give me that £1 billion contract, please, Premier League club. And it's just ridiculous. It's playing the game. It's playing the game. And it stinks of Riola, and that's exactly what it is. Mr. Stinky Pants Riola.
What did he actually say that's making you all so definitive?
Oh, I mean, I'm not definitive yet. I mean, if I'm honest, I know Rob is, but I'm not quite there yet because at the end of the day, I think if he does come to City, and I think we all agreed quite a while back that he stays for 3 or 4 seasons, and then if he wants to go to Real Madrid or Barcelona, City have shown they're not going to stand in the way of a player if they want to leave. So he's more likely to leave, isn't he, from us than he would do if he signs for Real Madrid or Barcelona, because they're going to hold on to him for dear life, and just make sure that he can't leave or make it very unpleasant, because that's what they do when they want to do it. We've shown we don't do that.
No, it is a funny one, but it'd be interesting to see what actually does happen. I think he might well come to the City.
Well, I mean, he also said in this interview that who does he think will win the Champions League this season? And he thinks it's between 3 clubs, and that's City, PSG, and Real Madrid. My money, I don't think PSG will win it, because we've seen over the last couple of seasons, they all just kind of too many egos, not a proper team. Real Madrid, for me, are not, they're not even at the top of the.
Well, that's the thing. Real
Madrid
are equivalent to about Brighton right now. They're not a fucking good team. They're not. They've got a potent attacking force. That's about it. But the thing is,
and the other thing for me as well with Real Madrid, Rob. The other thing for me for Real Madrid is that you've got a good few young stars, but the majority of their squad is aging really badly.
Yeah,
like their midfield is so old. And you'd think they'd want to prioritise, get Mbappe. I understand that move because you'll get him on a free and then you'll pay whatever wages he wants. But you need to improve the rest of your squad before you start just signing world-class superstars.
Well, the thing that drives me... Sorry, Rich. The thing that drives me most nuts about this entire thing is Haaland is literally going to be playing Europa League football until the end of the season. And he'll probably win the Europa League with Dortmund. Well done. I think he's injured at the minute, but he will be back. I mean, I think Dortmund have got Rangers, and obviously I want Rangers to win, but it's highly unlikely. But
why? Why will sign both players though?
No,
him and Mbappe.
But why? Why stay in Europa League until the summer? Haaland can quite literally come to Manchester right now and be guaranteed a Champions League winners medal and the Premier League winners medal and an FA Cup winners medal. I just don't understand why you would stagnate your career like that.
Because he has to give up about 60 million if he does that. Because Dortmund have said, or they said previously, they wanted about 120 for him.
He'll be more than compensated, Rich. He'd be more than compensated. That Puma deal alone is £50 million a year. It's just stupid. He's looking.
Well, the fact
he's looking at numbers and
he hasn't done it suggests he won't be more than compensated.
No, it suggests that his agent is greedy as fuck and wants every single penny he can get out of this deal.
Especially when, the agent fees are about to change as well.
Mm.
Chris Baker's thrown out his fishing line there. Fuck Carlin, we need Kane. Yeah, okay.
Oh,
Well,
God.
there started to be rumours about Kane again.
Oh, great. We'll sign an even older, even less potent Kane. Great. No, the Dybala links are not true in the slightest. Dybala's contract is up in the summer, and his agent is literally throwing his name at every club and seeing which one sticks. Dybala
Yeah, and
is not
because
coming
we've
to the
been linked with
Premier
him so many times in the past, that's just what they're doing right now. We've already got a number of players like Dybala in our squad. We don't need another one.
Yeah, absolutely. Muddy Duck, I agree with you that Real Madrid can't afford all of those players, but guess what? They are the masters of the dark arts, and if they want to fudge the numbers, they will fudge the numbers. Right.
But I mean, Madrid have to be in for Haaland because it's the only leverage they've got with Mbappe, and that's the trouble. Who do they really want? And if you're in for one of them, you have to say you're in for two to get your leverage on signing the first one.
Well,
So
they're looking.
who knows what's
Real Madrid
happening.
are looking for their next Ronaldo, next Gareth Bale, aren't they? I mean, I know Gareth Bale wasn't loved at Real Madrid, but that's what they're looking for. They're looking for the next generation of that, the Galactico player, and yeah, whatever. Right, Rich. We're a few minutes in now. A few people have joined us. It is time for your ranty rant to start. So you go nuts.
Excellent.
You go nuts, and me and Ozzy will pop in every now and then and go, "What? Huh? What?
Yeah.
What?
Well, I know I've talked to you boys about this previously, but just over the last month and a half, as soon as we hit the top of the league, all the absolute crap in the media starts to come out, and the people with real, agendas against City, whose insecurities are being blown up by the professionalism and quality of City, come out with all their pathetic, lame excuses, and frankly, a lot of lies. And I just wanted to have a chat with you guys tonight about some of these lies, some of these myths, some of this nonsense. Have a bit of a rant. Hopefully, a few people learn something to use as a bit of an ammunition back at such idiots. But, I don't know where to start. I think probably the thing that really triggered me this week was an article by John Aldridge in the Irish Independent. You might remember him. He looked a bit like Ian Rush, but was kind of like the B-Tech version. Played a few games for Liverpool, 30 years ago. But he came in and he basically said, "Oh, poor Liverpool, they should have won 4 league titles in the last few years if it wasn't for the dramatic spending of City, who signed players who are all disasters, but they then replaced them with 200 million, pound signings, and just an absolute load of trot." Now, then, even had the audacity, I think, to mention history in it. Now, it got me, looking up a few things about history and the myths in the media that we listen to. Did Ozzy and Rob, did you know that of the current Premier League, City are the 5th oldest club? We've been in existence for the 5th longest. So to me, that suggests we've got the 5th longest
Rich,
history.
I'm challenging that straight away. As everybody out there knows, before 2008, I didn't follow football because Manchester City didn't exist. There's all these photographs and all these memories I have of the 80s and 90s, but they did not exist. It was just all a figment of my imagination because we were created in 2008. So I don't know what... The Premier League was started in 1992. Rich, football was started in 1992. We weren't around until 2008, so I don't even know what you're waffling about, mate. Sorry.
Well,
you're waffling now, Rich. Come on.
1880, and in fact, of the sort of big six, the only club actually older than us is our neighbours Newton Heath from across the road in Trafford, and amazingly enough, our history goes back longer than the greatest teams in football. Arsenal and Chelsea and Liverpool and Tottenham and clubs with their huge illustrious history, who miraculously haven't got it. But you wouldn't hear that, and this was highlighted a few years ago in the Champions League, when City were the oldest club left in the last 16 of the Champions League. And yet we were listening to clubs like Paris and, Liverpool telling us we had no history, even though our history went back far older. Yeah, I mean, we shouldn't have to listen to that. My view is, and amazingly enough, the dictionary agrees with me, history isn't a function of trophies. History is a function of time. So you have rich history, and the richest history exists in clubs like Stoke City, Notts County, Nottingham Forest, teams that go back 10, 15 years before City. That's where the history, and those clubs may not have all the trophies, but they certainly have rich stories over many, many decades. And then you have got real history boys in the Premier League, teams like Aston Villa and Everton, who go back, the longest of the Premier League teams, have success over a very, very long period of time. And yes, they may not have got lots and lots of money in recent decades and won a whole lot of trophies in the 80s and 90s, but they're clubs that have an incredibly rich history. So if someone's going to have a go at you about history as a City fan, if they're an Everton or an Aston Villa fan, a Stoke fan, even a Reading fan, a Birmingham fan, you can maybe show them a bit of respect that their clubs do have a longer history than us. But if they're coming from one of these Johnny-come-latelys like Liverpool or Chelsea or Arsenal or Spurs, you can just,
especially, like, obviously we've already covered this before, but in the last few weeks we've had that idiot, the club shop wanker called Ty from Arsenal Fan TV, who actual real Arsenal fans want him the fuck out of their club. But he was banging on about, where were Manchester City? Where were Manchester City? We're the history boys. And like I've said before, Manchester City won the FA Cup in 1904. Arsenal FC didn't even win their first trophy until 1930. Yes, I believe they won the league and the cup double. Great. That's an amazing achievement for an amazing historical club. But he was coming at it from the facts of the matter. City didn't exist before Arsenal. But we were winning trophies before Arsenal. And I made the point, which should be funny, were Manchester City fans between 1906 and 1929 going on at Arsenal fans on Arsenal fan radio saying, where's your history, where's your trophies, you're a plastic club, blah, blah. It's just complete, absolute waffle.
Exactly. And Rob, if you actually look at the current Premier League teams, the FA Cup for the first 40, 50 years of football was by far the biggest thing in football. And of the current Premier League clubs, we're the fourth team to win the FA Cup. So again though,
that's arbitrarily boiling it down to trophies, Rich, which, as you said, it's not the arbiter of success or history. It's just waffle.
I agree with that, but sometimes you have to fight fire with fire, and you can fight fire with facts. And the fact is, for all this talk about, even if you are going to define success as an element of history, that argument still fails to be a tool for, a Liverpool fan or an Arsenal fan to beat Manchester City. Because
why don't we talk about the origins of Liverpool, Rich? Because this really is something that irks the crap out of me. One, the entire city was founded on the back of literal slavery and literal slaves, whereas Manchester was the bastion of saying fuck you to slavery. Given the fact that we've got that trophy presented to us, of Abraham Lincoln, because we took strides to end slavery in this country, and Liverpool, the city of Liverpool, massively lined their fucking pockets massively on the back of slavery. Secondly to that, Liverpool FC was founded by a what? Was it a Labour Party? Was it a socialist member, Rich?
No. Liverpool were formed by the Tory mayor. He was actually it's quite a funny story. He was actually a director of Everton, a supporter of Everton, owned Everton's ground. And being a Tory mayor, he did what a Tory mayor would do, and he tried to increase their rent that Everton paid him for using the ground. And, the story goes he tried to triple or quadruple the rent. The rest of the Everton directors refused to get involved in that and, realised they were being gouged. So basically, some people take their ball home, when they're sulking because they've lost. He took his ground home and formed a new club because he wasn't able to rip off his current club by as much. And you
So what
point on
you're saying
Abraham
is
Lincoln's, yeah.
a
So
Liverpool,
then the club of the Tory mayor.
a Liverpudlian Tory ripping off Liverpudlians. How
Yeah,
about that?
that is their history,
Shocking.
and you're spot on about Abraham Lincoln. Whilst the political bodies of Liverpool were all lobbying the prime minister in the 1860s, wanting Britain to go and join the Civil War on the side of the Confederates, Manchester cotton workers went out on strike against slavery. And that is why Abraham Lincoln, in one of his speeches, even talked about Manchester above any other foreign place as being one of the cities that helped secure the Union victory. And it's why the statue was presented to Manchester and sits in the hallway. A contemporary writer at the time describing Liverpool said that more Confederate flags flew on the banks of the Mersey than on the banks of the Mississippi.
Well, it makes perfect sense to me, Rich, because Liverpudlians, especially Liverpool fans, I don't like to tar Evertonians with this brush, but Liverpudlians usually like to say they're not English, they're Scouse. And as it turns out, Scouse is just another state in the Confederacy.
Yeah. Well, Cal should always look at Liverpool as being, that, evil part of Everton that was cut out when they tried to rip off the club, and Everton, who, when you look at these history debates, come out very well, because when I look at every list about who was the team to win the FA Cup or who was the team to get formed, Everton seemed to come out better on nearly every one of those than Liverpool do. So it says to me, in fact, what you wouldn't believe, even in terms of Europe, City won in Europe before the likes of Arsenal, Chelsea, and Liverpool. So we have to listen, to so many things, and maybe we haven't succeeded in terms of trophies.
What Rich is saying, we've won an actual European Cup. No, come on. The Champions League is the only cup that matters.
Well, you might think so. I mean, I think there's an argument for the European Cup, but the Champions League's just the top 6 cup nowadays. I mean, I think less than half of the teams in the last 15 years have actually been champions.
Well, yeah.
When
you don't have to be a champion of anything. Domestically, you don't have to be a champion of anything. You just have to arbitrarily finish 4th in your domestic league in some cases. In other cases, you have to play the knockout games to get into the Champions League proper without being a champion of anything. And up until quite recently, you could literally draw your way to a final.
Yeah.
How is that the bastion of elite European football?
Well, it's the bastion of making money, and that's what it succeeds at doing. I mean, the Champions League was, after all, just invented as a way of trying to prevent the Super League, which it nearly failed to do. And that's why it is what it is, because it's about getting all of those G14 clubs guaranteed big money streams, big European games, and actually whether they're champions or whether the best team wins is, is an irrelevance. It's whether every club can make their, 250 million pounds from the season that really matters. So you need to get more on with contemporary football.
Hold on. What you're telling me is now Liverpool is a relatively proud, because it has got a dark past, relatively proud northern working class city. And what you're telling me is basically that this is just another trophy to rinse the pockets of hard-working northerners.
Of course, it's hard-working TV watchers mainly.
So it's not so
tickets.
Oh dear.
Yeah, it's that's the way it is, and unfortunately, we then have this history myth push around, and mainly you'll get it from United and Liverpool. For United, history primarily means post Ferguson's first 3 years, and then the immense history of the early 2000s and the late 90s. For Liverpool, history started with Shankly. They won some trophies before that, but they were certainly arguably, in fact, until the 80s, both, if you looked at cumulative top flight wins, throughout history, it wasn't till the 80s that Liverpool overtook Everton and Manchester United overtook City.
I've got a big question about this, Rich. When Liverpool started winning trophies in the 70s and 80s,
yeah,
I've heard personally that every single one of their squad came from within 1 mile of Stanley Park. And their
is
owner...
that the Stanley Park in Glasgow or the Stanley Park in Liverpool?
Hold on. And in Liverpool. And their owner just put a couple of quid. He owned like a paper shop or something, and he just put a bit of spare change into the club and miraculously turned around their fortunes. Is that true?
Yeah. Oh, well, interestingly, there's a Stanley Park, I think, must be a Stanley Park somewhere up near Glasgow, because I think most of their team came from a couple of miles of a Stanley Park somewhere in Scotland, because they certainly had a team half full of Scots that they'd bought and brought down. No, their owner, funnily enough, did quite a few things, a bit like City's owners did when they came in. They actually spent a lot of money doing up the training facilities and things. When Shankly came in, they say that there was 6-inch plants with daffodils, where Liverpool trained, and Shankly actually got money spent on the club and on the infrastructure, and then they brought down some good players, and like they were formed by a Tory brewer, it was another pinnacle industry of morality, the gambling industry that really funded Liverpool in those times. So you can see that in many ways that the money that formed Liverpool first came from trading on freedom, then came from selling alcohol to the working classes, and then came from taking, the little money the working classes had to buy pools by creating this false dream to basically fleece the poor.
So you're saying
and make yourself
tax.
rich. So
basically a poor tax.
Well, I mean, that's what the pools was. It was,
that's what all lotteries
like
are,
the lottery.
really. Yeah,
like the lottery. It's
tax,
about taking money from the poor by creating a dream to help fund the pastimes of the wealthy. So, and it's no different. I mean, some of the history in Manchester is where it really gets my goat. You look at the greatest crowds there's ever been in the game. Outside Wembley, biggest crowd ever, FA Cup, Manchester City, at Main Road. But the biggest league crowd ever, if you take out Wembley, was also at Main Road. But that was Manchester United. Why were they playing at Main Road? Well, they were playing at Main Road because when their ground got bombed and they were threatened with going out of existence, City stepped up. City let them play at our ground. 40,000 City fans were regularly going to games to watch them, and helping. So not only giving them a ground, but also City fans going along watching them, so that they had money through the coffers. And we're a club who through the centuries has helped them out by giving them kits. But I believe that's why they're known as the Regs, because they had to be helped out by other clubs. We've given them our ground. We've offered them our youth players. Many times in our history, we've bailed them out. And what did we get in return? We got that 35 years banner, and we got, that awful poison meat that a former owner decided to sell to the schools of Manchester to feed our kids. Yeah, really proud history. And another great bit of pride in there when they talk about, related party transactions and stuff. When United got rich, when the Premier League was formed, who was one of their shareholders? Sky TV. Sky TV, who kept that for quite a while. If you're talking about vested interests and fixing the game, what could be more so than that?
I'm flabbergasted personally that you're saying that a massive global corporation sort of doped their own league by propping up a big club and making them a Galactico club to better their product, to sell more subscriptions.
Yeah.
That almost sounds immoral, if not illegal.
It does, and it's not just United. I mean, Arsenal. It's a very sore topic for Spurs fans. But when Arsenal actually got into the original top flight, there was effectively, a pause in football, and then there was a voting process about whether the teams in the second division or the relegated teams, one of those teams was going to take the place in the top flight. And Arsenal were something like third or fourth in the second tier, but they went into this process with 6 other clubs, one of whom was actually Tottenham, who I think were in the top flight at the time and were maybe, arguably the team who should definitely have stayed up. But, people were seen meeting in dark corners. Envelopes were seen appearing in places. People who hadn't been able to afford to eat in nice restaurants were suddenly dining out. And then suddenly, by an almost unanimous vote, Arsenal got voted to go into the top flight. So there's a club with their amazing history who pretty much, from everything you read, bribed their way into the top flight.
Now, come on, Rich. Now, these clubs like Arsenal, they must have been investigated by FIFA, UEFA, taken to the courts.
Well, I think they used, Boris Johnson Senior, who used to be in charge of parliamentary inquiries. So all the MPs and other people who voted for Arsenal were all cleared. So, I guess there was nothing happening there. But, some things change a lot over time and some things don't change at all. And it appears to be that the Arsenal's entry into the top flight was very like parties at Downing Street are nowadays. Nothing to see here.
Sweptunderthecarpet.com.
Yeah. So all this history, all this nonsense we have to listen to, we can be bloody proud of our history. We've got a very old history. We were formed as a club for the right reasons, to help the working people of Manchester, not because we bribed our way in, not because we had a Tory mayor who wanted to increase the rent on the grounds. We were formed for the right reasons, in the right place, and should be bloody proud of that. And not only that, but we were actually there being successful before many of these clubs who sneer at us, and we were having far bigger crowds. We talked about this a few weeks ago about the crowds. Arsenal, immense history, boys. Well, Charlton Athletic, Chelsea and Spurs have all had bigger crowds in their history than Arsenal have. And as for Liverpool, their biggest ever home crowd at the mighty Anfield, the greatest stadium in the world, sits 19th of the teams in the current Football League. Clubs like Sheffield United, Sheffield Wednesday, Huddersfield, clubs that Liverpool fans would look down the nose at, have all been watched at home by bigger crowds than Liverpool ever have. So, you really, fans need to actually educate themselves about some of the things that are just posted as myths by ignorant, lazy journalists, and actually start to look at the facts that are out there.
You've got to say that with a bit more venom, Rich. You've got to go, facts!
Fact. Yeah, so that history, depending on who you're talking
History,
to,
mate, history.
Just a load of absolute bollocks that people think because they read the papers and they don't actually look at the facts and they don't think for themselves, and they take these stories of clubs formed in 2008 or 1992 and don't actually bother to learn what really happened.
Who owns the Sun newspaper, Rich? I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but who owns the Sun newspaper?
News Corp.
And who owns News Corp?
Well, the biggest shareholders, the Murdoch Family Trust.
And what other company does Rupert Murdoch own?
Well, he owns. I don't know if he does own. Does he own Sky still? I don't know if he does.
For the longest time on the planet, he owned Sky, and Sky make this thing called Sky Sports, and Sky Sports has Sky Sports Football, and Liverpool fans are rabidly signed up to Sky Sports Football, but they boycott the Sun.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Yeah.
Surely they'd boycott that as well.
You'd think so. But then, it's not just the history that we, have a right to feel aggrieved about some of the things we read. It's also the nonsense talked today about money and about the spending. Interestingly, when we sold Ferran Torres to Barcelona the other week, we dropped below Manchester United in terms of both a season, 5 seasons, 10 seasons net spend. So in every period you choose to look at now,
you can say that, Rich,
City
but we're still not
less.
we're still not in contention for the net spend Premier League trophy that Liverpool win every single year.
No, because we didn't find anyone to pay 5 times over the value for a mediocre attacking midfielder.
You say that, but I'd literally rather have Coutinho than Harry Grealish. Might as well.
Yeah, Ford Cortina than, but Harry Grealish and Ford Cortina. Well, the simple thing is, Liverpool talk about, but you do have to be fair to them. Old, Alf Salah, he grew up in Bootle, quite near where Alvin Martin was born. He was a bit of a mentor to him as a kid. Stanley Van Dijk, again, grew up Toxteth, mentored by Robbie Fowler. I mean, so they have a team, who've not cost them anything. I mean, Alisson, I think they signed from Tranmere for, was it 30,000 or something? So
I think Tranmere
really
paid Liverpool 30,000.
Okay,
to get him off the
get him
books.
on loan for a couple of weeks. Yeah.
Listen, honestly, that Liverpool. I mean, do you want to have a minute's applause for Liverpool and the fact that they don't spend any money?
Oh no, not really.
No, okay.
I think that.
What about? Hold on, Rich. What about having a minute's applause for the fact that Liverpool have apparently got the best player in the world in every position, the best manager, the best fans, but they barely win any trophies.
Yeah, and VAR as well helping them. It's almost a freak of nature that Liverpool, ever draw a game, let alone not be top. Because we've heard this week they've got the best right back in the world, the best left back in the world, the best centre back in the world, the best goalkeeper in the world. I think they've got the best player in the world,
best ball boys in the world.
Fabinho's the best, attacking midfield. They've got the best fans in the world. When they start, pumping up
best
that
seats in the world, best pies in the world, best pints in the world, best walk to the ground in the world, best bus in the world.
Klopp is a miles better manager than Guardiola. We keep getting told that, and they clearly have VAR on their side, judging by watching the games on Saturday. So it just staggers me that with all those things in their favour, you would honestly think that it wouldn't be the Invincibles, that they should, with what they have, be getting 114 points a season, clearly, and probably a goal difference of over 100. And it's not being achieved. So something somewhere is going wrong. I'm not clear. I've read about all the things that they have that are the best, but they're not winning the league every year. So something somewhere is going wrong. The press are missing something.
Hang on, Rich. Now, the team of the year came out recently. And did anyone see it? Because I don't remember a single Liverpool player being in there. Now, you could argue and say some of the players who were in it maybe shouldn't have been in it. But they didn't have one. And yet you're telling me Liverpool fans say they've got the best team in the world. No,
well,
surely not.
I don't know that they always say the best team in the world, but they certainly say they've got the best left back, the best goalkeeper, the best centre back, the best right back, the best holding midfielder, and the best player. So,
but yet they weren't in the team of the year at all. Well, not one player.
No, team of the universe, not just the year. We're talking above that.
Shocking.
It is, but so I don't know what goes wrong, but something obviously goes wrong. Apparently, it's because we spend so much money. It just somehow that must just jinx all their best players. Because I thought the only thing you could do with money would be to buy the best players, but we can't because they're all at Liverpool. So I don't understand why our money is pushing Liverpool out of all these trophies, but apparently it is. But if you actually look at the net spend, you know, Man United has spent more than us, and Arsenal, who Alan Davis with his absolute rant the other week, in the last 5 seasons, Arsenal's net spend is only 50 million less
Hold on,
than
Rich.
Manchester City.
I just need to add a bit of a correction there. Alan Davis didn't go on a rant the other week. He went on. He just bile and racism. You're on a rant right now, and there is a massive difference. You're not being
Just
a
a little
racist
one.
or bigot or anything
okay.
like that.
Yeah. But Arsenal, 50 million less. So that's 10 million a season. And we've used that. We've generated over $500 million in TV and prize money from more than Arsenal in those last 5 years. In fact, it's a lot more than 500 million. So strikes me that our investment of the extra 50 million, that is a colossal, huge gap between the clubs of, 800k a month more spent on transfers than them. That huge gap. Well, it's generating us, 10 million a month. So to me, as a finance person, that seems like a pretty shrewd investment. Very shrewd investment. I can't believe for a minute that they're, even arguing about it. And then, so, and we always hear, City, and this is one that gets them on. As Aldridge came out with, City can make mistakes in the transfer market, but they just pull out 200 million and fix them. Now, I know you might have your thoughts on this about Jack Grealish, Rob, but if we look at our record signings, De Bruyne, Sané, Walker, Stones, Mendy, Rodri, Mahrez, Diaz, Grealish, Laporte, Cancelo. Now, one of those, clearly a disaster. Clearly a very, very bad signing. Grealish, clearly still up in the air. He's, I know some people have made their minds up, some haven't, but, clearly not yet make his money. But of the rest of those signings, they've all been fantastic. All of them have stayed and won, multiple leagues with us. Possibly the only exception in terms of going was Sané. But even Sané, we doubled our money and got, a good few seasons out of him. So they've all been good signings. That's the reason why our money hurts other clubs. Because when we're signing Diaz, other clubs are spending 20 million more on signing Harry Maguire. When we sign, a player like Mahrez, other clubs are spending 20 million more on Nicolas Pepe. So, people should start worrying about how they spend their own money instead of beating us up for actually being successful. And in Aldridge's bloody article about, how we just, sign players to replace bad signings, the only example he could think of was Claudio Bravo. Now, Claudio Bravo was signed, 5.5 years ago. Claudio Bravo may not have been quite as good as we hoped, but he won some things with us. And he also enabled the club to transition from playing Pellegrini football to Pep football. And Ederson would never have come in and made the same impact as he did. But even if you put Bravo and Ederson together, they still cost, 25 million less than Chelsea's reserve goalkeeper or 20 million less than Liverpool's goalkeeper. So how on earth that can be overspending and, making a mistake is beyond me. I mean, it just shows how utterly ignorant and clueless about football Aldridge is. Absolutely bloody clueless.
Wasn't our last big spend, like when we're talking a good few $100 million here, wasn't it in 2018?
Well, it was probably before that. It was back when we were filling and signing our fullbacks. And people talk about signing fullbacks every year, but I look at our fullbacks. We've got at the left, we've got Zinchenko, who we signed for 1.5 million. We've got Cancelo, who we did sign 18 months ago, but has been, I think one of the best players, one of the best fullbacks in the world, and a brilliant deal. And at right, we've got Walker, who we signed back, when Pep came in, pretty much, who's come and done exactly what we signed him for and been brilliant. So I don't know how anyone can beat us up for those either. And even at centre back, the signings we've made since the Pep era, are all doing well. No one can question how we've done with Stones or Diaz or Laporte. They've all
I don't
been great
understand.
signings, and we get money back on every single one of them.
I don't
if we
understand
sold
why
them today.
anyone would go off to Claudio Bravo. Yeah, right. Claudio Bravo wasn't the finished article, but he was sort of like a statement of intent of, this is how I intend to play with distribution from the back.
Yeah.
And it has completely changed the face of British football forever.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't as if Claudio Bravo cost fortunes either. It's just a ridiculous argument made by an absolute idiot.
It cost half an Andy Carroll. I mean, it really was not a big sign. And Ederson was then signed for 30 million, and Ederson came in and hit the ground running because Claudio Bravo had helped train the defence and the whole team how to play with a goalkeeper like that. And so, maybe Ederson wouldn't have been the success he has. In fact, almost certainly Ederson wouldn't have been the success he has been if it hadn't been for Claudio Bravo coming in. So to slag us off, Aldridge has to go back 5.5 years to find an example. And even then, I think the three of us can agree it was an absolutely rubbish example, because Bravo...
There's a thing called clutching at straws, Rich, and this was just absolutely barrel bottom of clutching at straws, just by an absolute idiot. And I'd like to say, by the way, I want you lot out there to go and look at a picture of John Aldridge. There's this thing that happens to former Liverpool players. They all start looking like each other. John Aldridge, Ian Rush, Steven Gerrard's even developing that face now. Is there a few other examples, Rich? They all just sort of have that typical Liverpool face, and it is a very punchable face as well. It's got that stupid nose and stupid face of just idiots. Yeah. And they're just churned out by the media all the time. Come and spout some crap about City.
Yeah, it's a bit like something that comes out of the Chuckle Brothers, to be honest. I think they always, Rotherham's finest, always did a great parody of the Scousers, and it's kind of interesting that ex-Liverpool players want to play to this parody of Scousers that's almost made up to take the mick, but ex-Liverpool players seem to want to do it. I don't know why, but they and the things they say are just embarrassing. And even if they do want to go on about net spend trophies, well, if you were running any sort of business or measuring anything, you don't measure net spend without trophies and say it's successful. You measure net spend per trophy you get. So even if you do that and you look at the trophies that, that is it eight domestic trophies City have won.
I think
not including
about 50 million per trophy. League. Isn't that our sort of rough figure? We're about £50 million spent per trophy.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculously good.
And Liverpool actually, my funniest net spend stat is that Liverpool had actually spent just shy of 1.5 billion net when they won their first Premier League. It was the most expensive Premier League trophy ever won. But you wouldn't hear that. And then United fans can be just as bad. They go on about, how we spend on players. And it's like, well, every one of the players we've bought for 60, we can find someone else less successful they paid 80 for. And let's not forget, and this is where United and their friends in the media have been absolutely brilliant, is they created a myth of Ferguson. And I'm not knocking Ferguson here. He was a fantastic manager and he was doing what he was paid to do, but they created this myth that every player came from the class of 92 and that their squad for about 15, 20 years was made up of the class of 92. The class of 92 was phenomenal, but they supplemented that in 2 out of the 3 seasons Ferguson was there. So as in 2/3 of the seasons, they supplemented that by being the biggest spenders in the Premier League. Arsenal outspent them a couple of times. I think Blackburn once, Leeds once, and then Chelsea after Abramovich outspent them a few times. But most seasons it was Ferguson who was going out and signing a Rio Ferdinand, who was signing a Juan Sebastian Veron, who was signing Ruud van Nistelrooy, who was signing, Roy Keane, or even back in the day signing Bruce and Palestrin players, all of whom were, certainly with football inflation at around 4 times over the last 15 years, signings like Ferdinand, Rooney, Varane, they were all 100 million plus signings. And, there's some kind of idea or pretense that, they were just 30 million signings. So that's like, half a Ben White. It wasn't. Rio Ferdinand at the time was the equivalent today of 120 million.
Yep,
They were huge signings. They were huge signings to supplement a very good team. And funnily enough, that's pretty much what City do now.
Cole and York.
Great squad, and we supplement it.
Cantona, Cole, York, Kanchelskis.
Yeah.
Schmeichel, Yapstam, and then later you've got Ferdinand, Berbatov, Rooney, Vidic. There's just crap loads of players that they've blown absolute fortunes on.
And you know what? When they're doing all this, the media rely on ignorance of supporters and ignorance of history and ignorance of how finance works to try and peddle some myths. So, I might get a little bit technical here. So, if anyone in the chat can message Rob if there's anything that's not really understood. But there's a few things that are peddled about as myths by all these, all these journalists, I'll call them in inverted commas, to bash City with. So, they talk about financial doping or the owner pouring in all the sponsorship or anything else. Well, there's a few facts here. So the first one is about the related parties and all our sponsors being from Abu Dhabi. If you actually look at the last 5 years, the biggest sponsor growth we've had, Puma, Nissan, Nexon, EA Sports, Oracle, Cisco, companies like that, none of whom belong to the UAE. Now, none of whom belong to Abu Dhabi. Now, we do have sponsors like Etisalat and Etihad who sponsor us from the Emirates. But there is a test that has been part of UEFA Fair Play and it's now part of Premier League Fair Play, which says that there's no ban on related party sponsorship. Our owner could put Sheikh Mansour's ace on the front of our shirts and pay us 80 million if he wanted to, 80 million pounds a year to have Sheikh Mansour's ace. Now, what happens then is that we would declare that as a related party. And interestingly, the authorities and the accountants have all cleared the fact that Etihad isn't a related party and that Etisalat isn't a related party. So we could get a sponsorship from the Sheikh directly. And then it goes to what's called a fair value test. And anything that is fair valued, but through a sponsor, even if they're a related party, is allowed. Our Etihad deal was tested by, I believe it was PricewaterhouseCoopers as part of the fair play investigation back in 2014 and was cleared as fair value. And what fair value means, and this is how international companies, spread their profit around the world. And it is fair value. And that is to say that, are you getting an equivalent to other deals at other clubs? So what that means is fair value. And a company like Pricewaterhouse will go in and they will look at the deals that equivalent clubs have based on success, what league they're in, the media presence, etc. And they will then test what you've got against that. And if that is on par or less, you get cleared on fair value. And therefore, this whole nonsense agenda from Der Spiegel about Etihad being a problem because it was a related party. Firstly, legally, it wasn't a related party. That was cleared, and that was, investigated and cleared as not a related party. And secondly, it was fair value anyway. So even if it was directly shown that the Sheikh was sponsoring City through another company, it would be irrelevant because it was at fair value. So again, a myth that relies on the ignorance of fans, because let's be honest, what regular football fan knows about the technicalities of accounting and international transactions? So they rely on the ignorance. Or
all I know, Rich, is
they
what
are
the Daily
ignorant
Mail tell me to
themselves.
know. I believe whatever the Daily Mail tell me to believe. I believe that. What social media all the time, that's where I get my facts from. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, and so there's nonsense, and then you get this absolute nonsense about how can City's commercial revenue be better than ours when we've got more fans? Well, that just shows an ignorance of why companies don't sponsor a club, because they think, oh, if we sponsor City with our, Middle Eastern telco company, or Standard Chartered sponsor Liverpool, they don't do it because they think lots of Liverpool fans are going to go out and buy,
what happened with
Standard
Liverpool Standard
Chartered.
Chartered? What happened?
Well, they got fined over $1 billion for money
Why?
laundering for all sorts of very nefarious
lying.
things.
What?
Yes.
No.
Yes. And so, club sponsorship is done to get a reach, to effectively get to as many people around the world as can get your brand recognition. And the fact is that definitely Liverpool or Manchester United have more fans than us globally, but those fans don't necessarily
Does they
spend
get a trophy
any
for
more
that,
money,
Rich?
and that doesn't actually affect the viewership, which is pretty consistent on TV across the world between the big clubs. Really, viewership goes along with the games that are the most interesting and the teams that are playing the best football.
How many trophies do you get for having more fans around the world?
Well, there's probably a few, because I know there's a few trophies that have been invented recently. The Net Spend Trophy, the Christmas Trophy, the Best Fullbacks in the World Trophy.
We Beat City
Cup. There may be a trophy somewhere, around, the Emirates or around Anfield for.
What's that amazing trophy that Harry Kane won with Tottenham? They won an amazing trophy. They won Tottenham in the last couple of years. They won some Tin Pot Cup, like the Audi Cup or something like that. And then they won the We Beat City Cup. And then they won the We Won the Premier League on the opening day of the weekend Cup. They just Harry Kane is falling over for trophies.
Yeah. And that the interestingly, so City winning things and going deep in Europe is meaning that we're on TV more in big games than any of the other clubs, which is why we're now getting the most TV money, and getting the most TV money and the most TV viewership is what sponsors want. So sponsors then flock to that. And we also offer one thing that none of the other clubs do, and that is that we now have, 8-9 clubs around the world. And so we actually offer, sponsorship-wise, a far greater reach to far more supporters than not supporters, far more viewers than some of our rivals. So we're actually offering something that in football is at least innovative.
That sounds like cheating to me, Rich.
Yeah. And so when people
sounds like global domination. I mean,
yeah. And
can I ask, Rich,
how
many Chevrolets were sold in the Greater Manchester area when United sponsored them? Was it one or none?
Probably about none. Funny thing is, the guy who signed that deal got fired for exceeding his authority. Little known fact on that. So that deal in itself was apparently nearly challenged in court, but Chevrolet realised that they didn't have much of a legal leg to stand on. But another thing that people don't realise is that your average United Arsenal fan might think, oh, so your sponsorship, you times your number of fans by a number, and that's how much your sponsorship should be. No, there's companies, and quite a few companies, whose sole job is basically producing and selling data that looks at the values of sponsorship. And what they effectively do is, when a game is on, they will actually get viewership data for that match in whichever country it's on, and they will get the time that your logo or your brand appears on the screen, and they will actually calculate a cash figure of what that sponsorship is worth in terms of what you'd pay to have your brand shown to, 20 million people or 100 million people at that time, depending on the country. So sponsorship is actually calculated in quite a sophisticated way. And so when people go to sponsor, City will have that data, so they'll know what they think that sponsorship's worth. Very, very often the purchaser will have that data because they go to make an informed decision. So most of this sponsorship is actually being bought, on quite sophisticated marketing metrics. Like any other advert, it's being bought on, heavily technology backed metrics.
But it's all corrupt and bent, right? All of it. None of it's legitimate, right? City are bent.
Well, yes. I mean, I
keep getting told that City are bent, dirty oil club, blah blah blah. I don't know why it's dirty oil and not just oil. I mean, you all use it in your cars, but
you
keep getting taken to court over it.
Yeah, my honest view is of the last, the whole cast thing is, and I think Seraphin's made this pretty clear in some of his comments. I don't think UEFA, the top brass of UEFA, ever believed it was legitimate. I don't think they ever believed they were going to win. But, within the bodies that made that decision to challenge City, there were people like Rick Parry and Peter Kenyon and the guy who, owns PSG. So basically, the people who made the decision to punish City were actually, they were ex-employees in many cases of our biggest commercial rivals who had a very strong agenda, who had a lot of pressure on them from, their parent clubs. And I think basically the other clubs forced UEFA's hand, and UEFA didn't want a Super League. So UEFA quite clearly thought the easiest thing to do is let CAS throw this out. We know it's not going to stand, but at least if CAS throws it out, the other clubs can't say UEFA's done nothing. And so that really, I think, is what happened. And, and that's why, and that's why we've still got this investigation going on for financial fair play in the Premier League. Premier League rules are newer.
Hold on, Rich, just wind it in a little bit, mate. Peace in the Middle East, Israel, Palestine, Ukraine, Russia at the minute. All of these things are caused by Manchester City.
Yeah, well, you'd think so, and I've heard people going on about the immorality of City's owners. Like we're some kind of, and there is truth. There are things that we would consider in the UK to be immoral. That
like what? Talk me through it, Rich. Talk me through it, because I've got as far as I know, BAE Systems, British Aerospace Engineering, is a British company that builds torture devices for all of these companies that we condemn.
And that's the point. The UAE is the closest ally of Britain in the Middle East, and the closest ally of America in the Middle East. Everything they actually use in doing anything bad they ever do, they've purchased or been given as aid from the UK, the US, or other allies. And in many ways, the UAE is the most liberal, is the most liberal government in the Arab world. I mean, there are others, Qatar, Bahrain, who, might dispute that.
Yes or no, Rich? Are they any more bent and corrupt and immoral than any Western power? The answer is fucking no.
Of course not. Of course they're not. And they are just in many ways a proxy for Britain and the US in the Middle East. I mean, that's what they are. And we talk about the morality of owners. I mean, there's one Premier League club who have an owner who was a teacher in Siberia, and with friends and connections, to people like Yeltsin and Putin and a few people disappearing and things like that, became a billionaire. I find it hard to believe that was done by the quality of his teaching, but he became a billionaire. And we have the Arsenal owner who has moved a team from one city to another, treated a club as a franchise, who wants no promotion and relegation in the Premier League, and who has gone and signed what at the time was the biggest sponsorship deal of its kind anywhere in the world with a company from the UAE. So you've got Alan Davis, whose club is financially supported massively by the very same people he's slagging off, who then, not only has that, but they're also bought by an owner who wants no promotion and relegation, and who thinks football teams are franchises who can be moved to a totally different place, have the whole history and the whole supporters, football lives ruined, because that's the best way to make money. Or we have Liverpool owned by, hedge funds, or United owning by, friends of Trump's who are also invested in the defence industry, the very defence industry that then sells, things to the UAE, which then get involved in this oh so immoral stuff. So let's stop pretending that, there may be some moral owners in the Premier League. Delia Smith might be a very upstanding cookbook writer. And so there may be some, but they aren't our rivals, because I don't see any ounce of morality. And one of the clubs who are the most sanctimonious about how good their ownership is a certain Tottenham Hotspur, whose owner only owns Spurs because he made somewhere between 1 and 2 billion by breaking the British currency. When we go back, was it Black Wednesday or Black Friday when, interest rates got pushed up to 16% because Joe Lewis and his mates attacked the pound. They cost the British government billions. So that's billions out of our pensions, out of the NHS, that they cost the British government, which had to defend the pound. He then took that money, and he lives in the Bahamas, so he doesn't have to pay any tax on anything he makes. And he visits London on his £400 million yacht, but only for enough days that he never risks becoming tax resident. So here's a club that's money came from actually out of the pockets of our pensioners and our NHS, came out of the pockets of the British people. It was then ferreted away to the Bahamas, where it couldn't be taxed to help the British people. And that is supposedly the bastion of morality, of ownership that we're all meant to aspire to. Well, and what do you get for that ownership? You get empty seats and a bloody cheese room. And we're supposed to be looking up to that as, again, like we're supposed to be looking up to buy your way into the league Arsenal, or Tory mayor, rip off your own team, Liverpool, because of, the myths in the media.
Wow, Rich, take a breath. Take a breath.
Rich, they're the history
definitely.
boys, though. They're the history boys. That's the whole point, Rich. They overlook their own inadequacies. They overlook their own hubris and their own mentality and the mistakes that they make. They overlook all of these things. Because
come on now, Rob, you got to give them. They did win the I didn't lose a game for an entire season.
Oh my God, yeah, they drew the way to a championship in the most boring fashion ever, and everyone wants to say that it's the best team that ever existed. Fuck off. Listen, it was a great achievement going unbeaten for a season. Well done. Well done. You drew like 98 games, and you only won the Premier League. Great, amazing. Does that give you the right then? See, this is the problem. All of these clubs, when Sky Sports came in 1992, Leeds United had literally just won the Division 1 title before the Premier League started. Leeds United, arguably, were the biggest club in England. United won it the first year of Sky Sports takeover, then asserted themselves for eight years of the first 10 years of the Premier League. Manchester United won it. With Blackburn winning it in 95 under Jack Walker, Arsenal winning it in 98, I think it was, whatever it was. Newcastle came close. Newcastle flew close to the sun like Icarus and then melted their wings, blah, blah, blah. After that, Leeds went into irrelevancy for almost a decade, if not longer. It's just unbelievable. Arsenal won the odd title during that time, an FA Cup, and just because they were the teams that were prominent at that time, they become the history boys, and it makes no sense in the slightest. The Premier League could have happened at any stage. Imagine if the Premier League would have happened in the 1930s, or the Premier League would have happened in the late 1960s. It's a ridiculous argument to try and suggest that your club is the biggest boy just because that's when the sport became, I won't say global because the sport was already global, but accessible. To argue that you're the biggest boy because the sport has got limitless accessibility, it's just obscene. It's absolutely obscene. And all of these clubs, look, I'm not trying to suggest for a second that Manchester City are squeaky clean. They're absolutely not. We have done some ridiculous things in our history. Ridiculous things, and some immoral things in our history. But so has every other bloody club. And in some cases, as Rich has been highlighting over the last hour, some clubs have gone to the extremes, way more than any other club, to absolutely be a horrendous blot on history. You know, it's like, imagine being Henry VIII. When you're Henry VIII king, everybody loves you because they're afraid not to love you. Everybody respects you because they're afraid not to respect you. And as history's being written at the time, it's all being written incredibly favourably of you because obviously he's going to look at it. Oh, what's that historian writing? Killed his wife, cut her head off. No. That's not the agenda we want to set. That's not what you want to say at all. Write it like this instead. And that's what's been allowed to happen over the last 2 decades. All of these clubs have been acting like a tyrannical king. And now they've been usurped by somebody doing it better than them. They absolutely cannot fucking stand it.
Yeah. And I think that doubles, Rob, because I think there are fans who support their clubs for, many reasons. I mean, I did it for family reasons and the fact I was living a couple of miles from Main Road. In fact, most of my mates at school supported City, so it was the easy thing to do. But there are others who support their club because they want success, because their own feeling of self-worth, and there's some good psychological studies into this, they will attach their own self-worth to the success of their team. Now, we may know we have no influence on how City go on the pitch, and if City win or lose, it's not our fault. But there are supporters who do tie their own self-worth into it, and so they'll pick a club that is the most successful when they start supporting a club. And it is psychologically quite hard for someone who attaches some self-worth to the results of their club when that club doesn't succeed. And so therefore you get this slightly vitriolic, reaction. And you've also got to look at the people in the media. You are going to be, long term, the people with the connections into the best clubs and the most successful clubs will be the ones who in 10 years or 20 years are going to make the most money from their media careers, be it punditry or whatever. And so, for a pundit who's Liverpool or a pundit who's Manchester United, their own financial success and their own worth, as a business to make the money in future is tied into the success of that club. And as those clubs wane, their ability to earn is going to wane. So
that's the big thing, Rich. If you go back to the 90s, you had Hansen, Lawrenson, Liverpool, because Liverpool were big 10 years prior to that.
Yeah.
That you had people like Ron Atkinson and stuff like that. Aston Villa, because Aston Villa were big 10 years before. You know what I mean? And in the 2000s, it was United, ex-United. Roy Keane's still there now. And United haven't been successful for nearly a decade.
Yeah.
Micah Richards has been integrated now. Because City was successful.
Yeah.
It's just...
The secret with Roy Keane is that, and in some ways it is a difference between, the Aldridges and Carragers on one side and the Nevilles and the Keanes on the other, is that Neville and Keane they don't paint a picture that's false. They won't say Manchester United are the best team in the world when they're clearly not. They will get stuck into that team. And if City are better than Manchester United, they're not afraid to say City dominated this game. They're miles ahead of United at the moment. And so those two do have an element, as much as I hated them as footballers, they do have an element where they can be objective in a game. There are some of the journalists that, Phil Thompson was one. I think Aldridge is very clearly one. Carragher's one, who cannot be objective. They don't have it in them. They don't have the capability or the intellect to actually be objective about a game. They always have to come down on the side of their team. Graham Souness is an exception to that. I find that he can be fairly objective, but some of those, and Steve McManaman's another, they cannot be objective about football. All they can do is portray the Liverpool line, the bad luck line, the we're being robbed line, the we've got the best players in the world line. That's all they can do. And so I'll be fair to Keane. Keane can call a spade a spade. Whereas, you would not get that from some of the
I'll give you Roy
guys
Keane.
like Carragher.
I'll give you Roy Keane, and that's only because he doesn't suffer delusion like the rest of them do. But
yeah,
see, the thing about Roy Keane is still towing a certain line and a certain agenda. Roy Keane is still towing the Manchester United are the biggest club in the world, but he's doing it by pointing out how they're not the biggest club in the world right now.
Yeah.
So he's still towing the United line, but he's towing the History Boys, version of Manchester United. Most prestigious club, biggest club. You wear the badge with pride, blah, blah, blah. He still does it every single week, just to remind those United fans that are still watching what they are historically. Yeah. So it's still a version of that, Rich.
Yeah, no, and there are limits to the objectivity. Like Gary Neville couldn't, bring himself to slag off a mate for being a rubbish manager, when quite obviously everyone could see that, Ollie's time at the wheel was a disaster. Gary Neville couldn't bring himself to say that, but I do kind of have some sympathy to that, in that I can't imagine destroying a mate on national television, even if you didn't think they were doing the right thing.
Rich, it looks like your dogs are some very angry Liverpool fans in the background there.
Well,
right, Ozzy?
No, I think they're on. I think they're big City fans.
Are they? Ozzy, you still with us, mate?
Right.
Let's have some final thoughts, mate, because we've been going for an hour and 20 nearly. So let's have some final thoughts, unless there's any big agendas that you want to go at again, Rich, or...
No, I mean, I think that the one final thing, there are probably two more points I'd like to make. The first one is actually, again, a financial point, and people saying that the Sheikh is pouring money in, he's just throwing his money away, etc., etc. And just want to spell out something which, and this is what should really make, a team like Manchester United or a team like Arsenal are all about the money. This is what should really make them worry, is that the Sheikh, when he came in, he bought City for, between 1 and 200 million. Exact figure I don't have. He's invested in capital about 300 million in terms of, buying land around the ground. This is directly related to City, not other projects, doing up the academy, etc. And he spent, somewhere between 1.1 and 1.3 on players net. So he's gone out and spent, and he has recovered some money because, even though people say we're owned by the UAE, we actually did sell about 13% of the club to a big Chinese media company, and we sold 10% to a US fund called Silver Lake. So, the Sheikh's invested somewhere like 1.7, 1.8 billion, but he has actually recovered, even just related to City, ignoring the City Football Group. He's probably recovered about a third of that. So his net investment in City has probably, been 1.1, 1.2 billion. So that's the money that, other fans are saying that he's throwing away. But if you actually take the valuation that Silver Lake, who spent 6 months doing extensive due diligence on City and the financials and everything else, if you take that and actually apply, about 85% of the value, because they bought in the City Football Group, to Manchester City, and you apply that, the Sheikh's obviously given up 25% of the club that he sold off. Then his investment now is worth around 2.5 billion. So not only he's thrown 1.2 billion or whatever the exact amount is at Manchester City, he's created a squad that is now worth, close to $1 billion on the valuations. He's increased the brand value of the club from 0.2 billion US dollars to 1.3 billion US dollars, and he's turned his investment from being, in the low billions to over doubling it to actually having a market value now of about double what he invested. And that is a legitimate market value because that's based on what Silver Lake paid him to buy the 10% share. And Silver Lake have some, incredibly sophisticated buyers who will value a club and will only buy a business that they think they're going to make money out of.
Now,
so that
Rich,
think
there is some good
value.
in that. There is a lot of good in that from a purely, longevity standpoint. The club's not going to fold and go away in the next 6 weeks or whatever, but there are some negatives in that, and we'll get into that in a different day, different stream.
Yeah,
but,
there are some negatives, but the point is, the Sheikh hasn't thrown his money away. He has actually made more money from football and added more to his wealth from football than the owners at Chelsea, Liverpool, and United put together in that time.
Oh dear.
So not only is he, so that's just my point, that we've been very successful on the pitch, but we've actually been arguably more successful off the pitch. And it's not throwing money away. It's how you make money. It's how Amazon made money. It's how Google made money. You invest in the success of what ultimately your product or your service is. And with that success, you improve the value. So all these clubs like Liverpool and Arsenal who think, or United, who think that ferreting money out of the club in offshore dividends to give you a stream is the way to go. Well, the suggestion is that actually investing in your ground, in your training facilities, in your playing squad, in your manager, that is the way to succeed financially and non-financially.
Well, there you go. Right, Ozzy, you've been listening for an hour and change, mate. What's the story? Any final questions?
Well, I think for me, it comes down to Rich has made a lot of sense tonight. Good one, Rich. Loving it. But it also just comes down to where we're City at the moment, what we're doing. Well, we're dominating, clearly, not only off the pitch, but on the pitch. I think more of us are concerned with on the pitch. And the last, decade, we've won 15, 14 trophies. And when you look at the clubs around us, what have they won? Manchester United have won barely bugger all. They've not won the Premier League in forever. Liverpool, as much as they can turn round and go, oh, we've got the best team and all this, they've won 2 trophies in the last 5 years. 2. Now, they can go on and say, oh,
well, hold on, Ozzy. Hold on. They might win the League Cup this season, which has now become a massive trophy.
Well, yeah, they might do. They'll suddenly say that's the best trophy they've ever won or whatever rubbish. But I think clearly, we are the team going forward, best on the pitch, best off the pitch. Enough said.
Yeah. Facts.
Yeah.
Facts.
And then my final point is, you've won when the only thing that can be thrown at you, and this is all some journalists have left, is that we're boring. We're boring because we're good. We're boring like Tiger Woods was in his prime. We're boring like Floyd Mayweather. We're boring because when you have the most shots, the most goals from outside the area, the most wins, the biggest goal difference, that's boring.
Most points ever.
Yeah. Goals, points, wins, shots. attacking football, that's boring. And
We're
that's
doing it without a
all some
striker.
people-
You know, you look at it like this, right? When Mourinho
all
first came to
some
the Premier
people have
League,
left.
when Mourinho came to the Premier League, he won every game 1-0 and defended, and it was seriously boring. But everyone said it revolutionised football. When Ferguson won the league countless times, he did it by constantly badgering the fourth official and saying the game ain't over until I say it's fucking over. And it was scripted every single week. It was scripted. It was like the WWF or the WWE. It was ridiculous. It's like, oh, John Cena's down on the mat. Oh, he's going to get to the 3 count. Oh, but no, he's put his arm up in the air and he's back in it. Oh, and John Cena's won. That's what Manchester United were like every single fucking week for nearly 20 years. They were 2-2 draw in the 98th minute. Oh, United need this win to win the league. Will they do it? Oh, yes, we're going to play 116 minutes until they do fucking win. That was United. And Liverpool, the Nearly boys. Took them 30 years to win a Premier League trophy. And they're the biggest team in the world, apparently. Chelsea, boring as fuck. Blackburn, bought the league. Leicester are the only incredible achievement in the Premier League outside of what Manchester City do in reality. And that's a fact. And none of them can fucking tolerate it. None of them can tolerate the fact that Man United winning the league for nearly 2 decades was boring as fuck. And it was scripted as fuck. It was like an episode of fucking EastEnders. And guess what? That's where all the fans are from too. Dickheads. So, whatever. Drink your fucking salty tears. Manchester City are better than you. Fact.
And let's hope that all these rival clubs keep on with this, because as long as they're whining and making excuses and rewriting history to make themselves feel better, then we will keep winning things and we will keep being successful. The only time that that's going to change is when people, our rivals, stop making excuses and focus on becoming better than us. And if they do that, good luck to them. We'll have some competition. But as long as they're just excuses for clubs who just make excuses and look for, rewriting history to make themselves feel better, they'll keep failing. And, I'm good with that. We'll stick to the trophies and you stick to the myths.
Big Morgan, you're technically right, but I was selling a story, mate. And that's how this works. Sell stories. Right. Thank you, Rich. Thank you, Ozzy. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Good night.